Yaida Ford, Ward 8 Table Talk.
Creating opportunities and fighting for you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yaida Ford, and I am running for Ward 8 City Council. Welcome to Yaida Ford's Ward 8 Table Talk, where we discuss issues that are the most impactful for Ward 8 residents. And we're engaging residents this way primarily because of the COVID-19 crisis. And it's been really exciting to talk with different panelists about various issues. And today we're going to be talking about education in Ward 8, one of my top priorities in the ward. And we have two very special guests that I respect and that I honor, and I'm so glad that they're here with me, Mr. Vaughn Jones and Nigel Atwell. And I'm going to read off a bunch of accolades, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to read off as much as I can about each one of these gentlemen to get you acquainted with them. Mr. Vaughn Jones is one of the city's most prominent basketball coaches. He's been coaching in DCPS for 17 years, most notably at Coolidge High School, where he coached for 10 years and won multiple championship titles. He graduated from DeMatha High School and went on to graduate from George Washington University, where he played basketball and helped lead the team to the university's only appearance in the NCAA Sweet 16 conference. And I think that's to date, right, Vaughn? That's still...
Yeah, that's still today. Yep, we're still the only team in GW history to reach the Sweet 16. So yeah.
Yes. So Vaughn is really a history maker. He was also All-Met in DC, and just really committed. He is a Ward 8 resident from Ward 8, born and raised, and just gives back every day. So Vaughn, welcome.
Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce to you all Mr. Nigel Atwell. Nigel is the managing attorney of the law office of Nigel M. Atwell. It is a civil rights law practice that focuses exclusively on education and employment law issues. Mr. Atwell's education practice primarily serves parents of children who attend traditional public and public charter schools in DC. I've worked with Nigel extensively. We are litigating a case together, which if we have some time, Nigel will get into it. But we are representing some parents with special needs children in DCPS whose children have been physically assaulted within DCPS. So Nigel's doing very important work. He's very dedicated and committed. And he's also a graduate of HU. I had to throw that in there. So Nigel, welcome. You know what you're supposed to say, Nigel.
You know.
Thank you. So welcome, Nigel and Vaughn. And I just want to jump into it. You know, I think we're going to do a part 2 already because education is so important, and I know we're on limited time. But Nigel, I'm going to start with you. You taught in DC public schools as well, and what are, in your view, some of the issues facing our, particularly our African American children, African American boys? You know, as it relates to literacy and some other things that you've seen as a teacher and now as a lawyer?
Well, I mean, the primary thing that is at the top of my mind is the achievement gap. And, you know, you'll hear politicians and policymakers and people in think tanks and teachers talk about it, but they kind of talk around the issue. To me, this is the issue of race and poverty. There's nothing, you can't talk around it. You look at Ward 8 and just go and talk to the parents. Ask them if they feel that the educations that their children are receiving in the schools that they're attending, if those educations are the same as the educations that children over in Northwest, west of Rock Creek Park are receiving. I venture to guess that the answer is going to be no. And that's wrong. Look, if you listen to people like Ibram Kendi, who's the brother that wrote the book on how to be an anti-racist, he will say that the reason that you have these education achievement gaps is because policies that had racial impact were put into place. You had segregation, you had Jim Crow, you had discrimination, you had the resulting poverty concentrated in Ward 8, and that is the problem. Teachers can't do it all by themselves. The District of Columbia government has to address the problem of poverty. And talk to Ron. Ron is there now. Ask him whether he believes that has an impact on teaching in District of Columbia Public.
Well, you know,
High
and I
School
was
education.
going to turn it over to Vaughn because I do want to get into this a little bit. You know, Nigel, Vaughn just mentioned a very good point that this is about race and poverty. So my question to you, Vaughn, would be, you know, is the public charter and the, you know, kind of the advent of public charter, which is now a big thing in DC, does that matter? Is that helping? You know, you know, we started the public charter system and we've got more public charter schools in Ward 8 now, and we've got KIPP, I think KIPP High School, another public charter is coming. I mean, is that helping narrow the achievement gap between our kids east of the river and other kids in the district?
Well, I mean, I work in DC public schools, but if you look at the charter numbers, there in Ward 8, there's only two high functioning schools, Thurgood Marshall, which is a high school that's on MLK, and then you have KIPP, the KIPP Academy, which the school that I used to go to, which was Our Lady Perpetual Help, which is on V Street Southeast. So those are the only two high performing schools in Ward 8. So I guess in a sense it may help, but it also dilutes the funding because a lot of those charter schools take a lot of the students that would normally be in DCPS schools. So it's kind of like we have a bunch of schools, but we're really not attaining our targets.
Yeah. So, you know, we're taking funding that was not adequate in the first place and then spreading it around to more schools. And then the kids that are left at DCPS schools are getting left out and left behind.
Correct.
And so are the teachers. So Vaughn, you know, I want to segue a little bit now into some of the issues that you've seen teaching, because you taught at both public and public charter, and you've coached, and you've coached Black boys. And so I really want to get into a little bit. What are some of the areas, you know, I think we know what plagues DC schools, right?
Right.
But what do you think are maybe one or two things that we could do, like considering the issues that our kids who are really living in palpable poverty?
Yeah.
What are two things that you think that we could do systemically that would at least address part of the issues that our kids are facing?
Well, I think the first thing is what Nigel spoke about, was poverty. A lot of our kids, when they come to school, they don't eat. I've been coaching for, you know, almost 20 years now, and I can't even count how much money I've spent on food, transportation, clothing. So those are some of the most basic needs that students don't have. And when they get to school, you know, the reason why DC schools never close mostly is because of they know most students can't eat. And so when they get to school, they're very hungry. It's hard to teach a student if they can't even they can't eat, if they're not able to, you know, just understand, like, I can't even get in my mind about doing an equation for math or reading this passage because I'm hungry. And after you get through all of those layers, you find out that the kid is really hungry. So I've coached for almost 20 years. And I lost a kid that died about 3 years ago. And really it was malnutrition. He was out there playing basketball. He shouldn't have been playing. He wasn't cleared. And the kid basically died from poverty of just being hungry, because his body was so frail. I mean, you know well about this kid that I'm talking about. I won't say his name, but I mean, it's heartbreaking that we don't address the issues, the basic needs of the students, which is, you know, feeding them. And then the second part to the question is, the other thing I think is trauma. A lot of our kids face a lot of trauma. We just lost a student that went to Coolidge who was murdered about 4 days ago in Northeast. And so many of these kids have to go to so many funerals, and they deal with so much trauma. So I think that's the other component that we need to add and look at for the future systemically, is adding some trauma-infused resources for our students and our parents.
Yeah, and you know, everybody's talking about that a lot more, Vaughn, and I'm going to jump to Nigel, but I want to get back to that because, you know, people are now saying trauma-informed, like it's the word of the year. But what are we doing and what are we going to implement, right? That's going to actually give our teachers the support that they need so that they can teach our children, you know, because schools are still a learning environment, right? So that I want to get back to that. Nigel, I want to talk to you a little bit, and just even if we are able to get a teaser into our audience about this. You and I are working on some stuff at a school that is east of the river, where we are noticing that our students who have special needs are being not being handled appropriately. So to give an example, we've got children who have broken bones, coming home with broken bones, children who are being locked in closets. And Nigel, I want to talk a little bit about, as you see it in your practice, representing parents and families. What are some of the what is the group? What's behind it, Nigel? What I know you have to hypothesize a little bit, but what is the cause of only Black children being the victims of inadequate educational resorces here? Is that leading to some of this abuse that we're seeing?
Well, we could look at this generally when talking about Black children generally, and this is, well, what you're describing, I don't think is an issue of discipline. To me, it's an issue of abuse. Okay, two different things, but I'm going to put them in the same set, right? You know, it's a fact that Black children are the recipients of, I'm just going to call it aversive practices. That means physical discipline 90-something% of the time when it's done. It's a Black child, right? So when teachers are restraining or secluding or otherwise inappropriately handling children for the purpose of discipline, 90-something% of the time it's done to a Black child. So that's not just a DC problem, that's a problem in this country, right?
That's a fact.
That problem is worse when you talk about children with disabilities. So children with disabilities, and I venture to guess that in the District of Columbia, the grand majority of the children who have IEPs or who have diagnosed disabilities are deemed eligible for services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The grand majority of those children are African American, and children with disabilities receive discipline, physical inappropriate discipline, restraint, seclusion, or other inappropriate discipline more than non-disabled children. So, you know, everywhere you turn, it seems that Black children or disabled children are being treated differently because of some immutable characteristic, whether it's the color of their skin or the disability that they have. So that's a cultural problem in the United States. It's a problem in Washington, D.C. It's a problem in Chicago. It's a problem in New York. Any urban center where you have lots of Black people, or any other place where you have lots of Black people or disabled children, there's going to be a problem. There just has to be a sea change in the culture. How do we do that? You asked this again. It's not just a problem that teachers can solve. Policymakers in the government, you know, District of Columbia government, have to address this. With respect to what's going on at River Terrace, I can't theorize. I do have some theories. Look, you know, you have classrooms which are staffed by teachers aides who are often responsible for providing basic human needs, basic activities of daily living for children who cannot provide for themselves. They're not paid very well. These are very thankless jobs, and I'm not sure that the educational requirements for a person to take one of those assistants or aide jobs, that they're very high. You know, you or I could probably apply for one of those jobs and get one. I have no training in that area whatsoever.
Well, you know, and that brings me an important point, Nigel. You raised something really important there, and that is, you know, not just the low pay, but what are the qualifications? Are we getting qualified educational or paraeducators into these schools so that our students are getting the treatment that they not only that they need, but that they deserve? So I mean,
Exactly.
where are we recruiting from? How are we training these staff? I mean, these are some questions that I ask whenever a case like this walks through my door, or when you and I talk and converse often about the calls that you're getting. And it just begs the question: how is the district addressing this? Right, because our kids are suffering.
Absolutely. So Vaughn made a good point. So, you know, this issue of poverty, in this case, you know, disciplining Black children and disabled children differently than white children, it makes me think that we talked about the need to have trauma-informed classrooms. To me, teachers need professional development so that they are empathetic and understanding of what's going on and the effects of poverty, rather than, well, I got another bad kid in my classroom, so I'm going to treat him differently. And I venture to guess whether or not the same sort of training needs to be given to teachers and aides who are in these classrooms with children who have extreme needs, right? Extreme disabilities and extreme needs. Do they need continuing and mandatory education so they can understand who their charges are and be able to deliver the service in an understanding way, rather than, I've got to change this kid's diaper again, and I'm only getting paid $12 an hour to do this on a daily basis.
So that raises a cultural question for me. Vaughn, I want to go back to you, and I think, and then we're going to close out. Vaughn, is there an assumption that if we recruit teachers from, Ward 7 or Ward 8, or if we recruit Black folks, they're just automatically going to know what the issues are, and they're going to be the best ones to deal with our kids? I mean, is there an assumption with that? And then is that assumption wrong?
I think the assumption is wrong. I don't want to generalize and say I'm from Ward 8, but I actually ventured across the world. So I've traveled multiple places, and when people find out where I'm from, and they're like, "Oh, wow, you went there? You went to this place?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So the stigmatism is real, but I do think that there is some truth to that, because how I deal with students that's from Ward 8 and the students that I know in my community may be a little different than, a Caucasian man or a Caucasian woman who can't really relate to the environment of a student. So I know that it's hard when a kid is just eating candy and, stuff that's not nutritious, because that's all they have. So I kind of do understand a little bit better than, the majority of folks who are not from the community, who can't relate to the circumstances. And it's a real thing. But I think we should probably, what Nigel said, to teach, that's a teachable moment. Like, you can't teach folks how to deal with students in certain communities. I just believe that can happen. There are tools from one of my charter schools that I was at that taught resistance and taught how to, and without restraining, without putting your hands on the child, how to de-escalate situations. And they use real scenarios. So it's a skill that can be taught.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Vaughn Jones, special education teacher at Randall Highlands. Nigel Atwell, managing attorney at the law office of Nigel M. Atwell. We're going to do a part 2, gentlemen, because I really want to focus on the Black male teacher and Black boys in public schools, because that deserves a whole nother segment, and a couple of other issues that we weren't able to touch on today. So thank you all for joining me. Nigel, how can people get in touch with you if they're looking for legal representation in the education realm?
They can call directly. They can call my cell phone directly, 703-407-4618, and I'll be glad to talk with them and assist them in any way I can.
Thank you so much. I am captivated with both of you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. God bless you, everyone. We will be back with Yaida Ford's Ward 8 Table Talk. See you soon.
Thank you.
Yaida Ford, Ward 8 Table Talk.
Creating opportunities and fighting for you.